Ms. Foo Mee Har.
Mr. Speaker, before I start, I would like to declare my interest as Council Member of the Singapore Business Federation. Sir, businesses have both a responsibility and an opportunity to proactively commit to decarbonize. The impact of climate change and the opportunities presented for a green and sustainable economy have never been more urgent. While sustainability efforts amongst companies in Singapore have gathered pace, the lack of understanding of sustainability and the related concept has been a barrier to galvanizing strong action. During the recent Ecosperity Week held in September last year, it was revealed that some 250 chief executives of firms who have made net zero commitments are unsure how to reach their goals. From inconclusive measurement, reporting, and verification standards to a lack of agreement in defining sustainability performance, business leaders urgently need a framework to navigate their firms through these challenges. There remain many companies, especially our SMEs, who have yet to come on the green economy bandwagon. Many consider sustainable practices as regulatory requirements. They lack the understanding of its impact on their business and how to make the green transition. Yet, this is one of the most significant business opportunities that they can tap for business growth. Certain industry may need additional support to spur decarbonization ahead of others in anticipation of carbon border taxes such as European Union's carbon border adjustment mechanism, which puts carbon prices on imports into EU. Given SMEs' critical role in supply chains, we can boost their transition on three fronts. First, we can promote sector-based sustainability roadmaps with industry-aligned principles, frameworks, and uniform standards. Second, we need to support SMEs with pre-identified sector-based green solutions to fast-track adoption. Third, we can leverage on the ecosystem to build scalable green capabilities and collaborations. Sir, to catalyze transition, SMEs should be supported by government grants designed specifically for a range of industries, taking into consideration the limited scale and resources firms have in making the transition viable. Speaker, a carbon tax assigns cost to planet warming emissions and forces companies to consider the cost of pollution and environmental harm. Finance Minister Lawrence Wong have indicated that Singapore's carbon price is too low and will be up for review. I wholeheartedly agree. Our current carbon pricing at the rate of $5 per tonne of emissions pales in comparison to other jurisdictions, falling far short of the recent IMF guidance of $75 US or $100 Sing dollars per tonne of emissions for advanced economies. This is about 20 times our current rate. Whilst the plan to increase carbon tax is imminent, we need to carefully calibrate the increase and consider the trade-offs. Too low, we fall short of our commitments in making a viable impact to nudge firms in the right direction. Too high, we risk firms passing on cost increases to consumers and end users, or worse still, moving business activities to countries with lower sustainability requirements and carbon pricing. Speaker, sir, the carbon tax in Singapore applies to approximately 30 to 40 companies. These high-emission firms, such as power generation and petrochemicals, directly employ over 27,000 workers and constitute 3% of Singapore's GDP, while providing business activities for a host of other sectors. So while these firms need to pay their fair share, there are some who are already pivoting their business activities towards low-carbon solutions in Singapore. For example, in 2020, Shell Singapore announced a 10-year plan to cut down local emissions by a third by the next decade. Similarly, ExxonMobil collaborated with local universities in launching the Singapore Energy Centre, forming centres of excellence in research and innovation to solve technological gaps amongst industry players. There's opportunity to work closely with such firms to co-create a sustainable future, helping transition high emitters of yesterday into green industry leaders of tomorrow here in Singapore. While Singapore's headline amount of $5 per tonne of emission is low, but it covers 80% of local emissions with no offset provision. In Southeast Asia, Indonesia is the only country other than Singapore which has announced concrete plans to introduce a carbon tax at a minimum rate of $2 per tonne of emissions only from 2022. Trade-exposed sectors in the EU, China, and South Korea receive free allowances under their emissions trading systems. So, Speaker Sir, whilst reviewing Singapore's model, we should note that there are more than 60 different carbon pricing initiatives worldwide. Each regime adapts to different strategies based on its own goals and constraints. While Singapore can learn valuable lessons from other jurisdictions, we need to develop our own unique playbook for carbon pricing and ensure any change is set and paced carefully to avoid dislocating our industry or losing our attractiveness as an investment location. Sir, we must recognize that any increase in carbon tax will result in increasing operating costs, directly impacting the largest upstream emitters as well as indirectly impacting downstream users, such as increases in electricity production costs that will likely be passed on. For instance, the Singapore Business Federation expects that carbon tax increases will impact the manufacturing sector hard, as utilities can comprise up to 9 to 10% of operating cost. Given the rising cost of labor, freight, and raw materials, any further increase in operating costs in the near term will adversely impact many companies already struggling in the current economic conditions. Currently, Singapore carbon tax does not apply to imports. This puts local SMEs in a disadvantaged position as Singapore embraces more advanced integration of sustainable practices at increased cost, affecting these companies' cost competitiveness relative to peers in the region. So to cushion the impact, the government should consider channeling part of the carbon tax revenue to subsidize the increase in cost for a specific transition period, as well as provide subsidies to adopt green technologies to spur companies towards green practices and reduce use of energy. Finally, I call on the government to ensure that the businesses are provided ample lead time on the implementation of any new carbon tax rates, giving them time to adjust whilst sending a strong but positive signal for companies to adapt and pivot. One good example is Sweden, which oversaw 3 decades of phased implementation before reaching its current pricings without hemorrhaging economic developments. So, sir, I call for a clear long-term trajectory of the expected changes to carbon tax will be key to Singapore to help companies make the business case to adopt new green technologies and make the necessary investment. With that, I support the motion.